So that's where someone dies and they do not yet know Jesus, and their soul goes, what I call, into the consuming fire of his presence. But they go there not knowing relationship with him. So that it's a fearful place. And it's a place of anguish. And because all of a sudden you're faced with your choices that you're there, and you feel guilt, shame, condemnation by being, and I've been there and loads of times and seen how people react to being there. And some of them just feel so unworthy, and therefore they're in torment, in anguish. But their ability to choose to accept Jesus does not stop at physical death. That is just a complete fabrication made by those who want you to make a decision to accept Jesus, using hell as the you can escape hell if you do this. Nowhere. And their rationale is, well, if people believe that they can be saved after death, well, why would they want to be saved before death? So we'll tell them they're going to go to hell, and then they'll want to be saved from hell. Salvation has nothing to do with being saved from hell. Salvation means being made whole, healed, and restored to relationship. Sozo, soteria. Nothing to do with hell. There's nothing to do with hell in the word or even the concept of the word. That's an evangelical fabrication. It is not true. You won't find it. And you won't find anywhere in the Bible that says death is the end of choice. It's not there. And for all those who died before Jesus went to the cross, he went into Hades or Sheol and preached to them and gave them the choice. But if he did that, then it would be totally unfair if after the resurrection that people today didn't have the opportunity of coming out of that place if they had not yet discovered Jesus. And so many of them haven't rejected him per se. They just never had the opportunity of actually having that truth. So that's really where we get the separation of what happens to people. But all of it is in Jesus. No one can come to the Father in a relationship without going through Jesus. All roads do not lead to God. Most roads lead nowhere. Before you had a realization of what Jesus had done, you were disconnected from your spirit, and your spirit was disconnected from God.
But so I suppose what happens to a spirit that's gone back to God, but a soul that is not?
Well, your soul is your consciousness or your personality. And your spirit came from God and will return to God and has an eternal nature. You know, essentially you were operating spiritually before you ever came here. But then you get disconnected from that because of the separation that actually takes place. And you go back to God, you know, but, you know, and essentially you go home waiting for your soul to catch up. You know, that's really what you're doing. But if you're a believer, your soul's already caught up with, and your spirit are already integrated. So there's no need for separation in that way. I know that in reality, these things are difficult because we're conditioned with a way of thinking. Most of the Western church, from an evangelical perspective, is conditioned. If you haven't come through an evangelical perspective, you don't have that conditioning in the same way. So everything is a bit sort of like, oh yeah, okay. But we've been told these things, and the whole way of presenting the so-called good news has become bad news for most people. You're really telling them that God doesn't love them rather than God does. And if they don't love God, they're going to be punished forever. You know, and that's not a good thing. And we've been conditioned by that. So most people would not even consider that that might not be true. And I never did until God took me and showed me and kept it on at me to reveal the truth. I never even, no, wasn't happy about it. Would I want people to go to a separation from God forever? No, of course not. But I still believe it was true. I just thought, well, people chose to. And people do choose to be separated from what God has done, or not to accept it, or not even knew about it. But that choice then becomes available to them again and again and again. And God is at work, and his love is still working like a fire to purify and refine everything that's a hindrance to them accepting that. And most of the hindrances are their own way of thinking. Because as soon as they are in that place, they feel totally unworthy, and their souls are in anguish, in realization that they have chosen to be there. And because most of them don't believe there's a way out, because that's what Christianity says, there is no way out if you end up in hell. So they believe that. So they actually believe that they're stuck there forever. But God is at work to try and get them out of that belief system by revealing the good news even there. And we're responsible for going and bringing that good news. You know, that's because Jesus told us to do everything he did. And he went into Sheol and he led captivity captive. Now it's our responsibility to make sure no one goes to that place by preaching the good news so they can accept that gospel message of salvation that's been already accomplished. And that's the good news message we should be carrying. And then if people don't hear that good news, because how many people were born and never had the opportunity? I mean, if you think the moment Jesus died and then 3 days later is resurrected, probably 99.9999% of the world had no idea that that took place. How many people died in the world in the next week or the next month when the message of good news had never even reached the world? So none of them would have had an opportunity because none of them even knew Jesus existed. Now, I don't believe people are without excuse from knowing that God exists because of the glory of the heaven. I mean, the Bible says, look, you know, there's many ways for people to realize that God exists. But entering into a relationship with him, when you're in a culture that believes in human sacrifice or whatever religious things, you're not going to have any clue about Jesus. Although, obviously, Jesus does visit people, and there are stories of him visiting people in tribes in the jungle and everything else. So there's a sense where he's already at work, looking to reveal himself. Let's make sure we have a good message that unveils that to people and not a bad one.